One of Ted Thompson's biggest flaws as general manager of the Green Bay Packers, and I say this, yes, admittedly, obviously, as a Bears fan, who, frankly, for the most part, what the hell would I know about winning competitive NFL football over the past 2.5 decades? I'm with you. But, still, from the outside looking in, one of the major flaws for Ted Thompson during his time as general manager of the Packers, where they still enjoyed a lot of success, consistently in the mix, winning division title after division title, playoff appearance after playoff appearance, Super Bowl championship, was his lack of aggressiveness and activity in free agency. Now look, in theory, Ted Thompson's approach of believing in building through the draft and developing your own talent and keeping them in-house and getting that chemistry and that years of familiarity and continuity is the right way to go about things. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that being the core fundamental tenet of how you operate your organization. Absolutely nothing. Every NFL team should pattern themselves after Ted Thompson in terms of that. In terms of understanding it's draft first, it's draft second. However, no matter how good you are in the draft, and especially with Ted Thompson, you could say he had hits, but he also had some misses. There just aren't enough picks every year to continue to replenish your roster. At some point in time, you have to fill gaps on your team via trading, via free agency, taking some of those draft picks you have and utilizing them as currency to flip them into solid established contributors, which is not something that was in the Ted Thompson playbook. It's like any sport. You can use draft picks to make your team better by drafting guys or positioning yourself to draft in the future or for getting guys that can help you right now. It doesn't always have to just be about drafting guys for now in the future. It does not have to be. And he ultimately got to the point where I feel like he got a little too full of himself in terms of, without knowing the man personally, just in the terms of the way he operated year after year. He stubbornly dug into his philosophy and he rode or died with it. But he had an overbelief and arrogance in the way he did it was the only way and it was the best way. Which for a lot of Packers fans I know is incredibly frustrating, and I'm with you. I understand why. Especially when you look at two of the best moves that organization ever made came in free agency. Talking about after the 1992 season, backing up the Brinks truck at that time to give Reggie White a record deal in the early days of NFL free agency. He was worth every penny of that mega deal at the time and so much more, and is still thought of as one of the truly great free agent signings of all time. And he was a major key building block and contributor to those Packers teams of the mid-90s that went to 2 straight Super Bowls and won a Lombardi trophy with Brett Favre and Mike Holmgren as the head coach. And then you look at the mid-2000s, bringing in Charles Woodson, who was kind of at that point in time, it felt like close to kind of the end of his career. He was going to kind of peter out in the league, and Green Bay was going to be his last desperate stop, a money grab. And Woodson goes on to become a defensive player of the year, and based off of his tenure in Green Bay, he helps lead them to a Super Bowl and establishes himself as a Pro Football Hall of Famer, which if he had never went to Green Bay, would have never been the conversation, I promise you. So it's weird. Like Reggie White, you sign him, big money in free agency, does all these incredible things, helps the organization do all these incredible things. You get Charles Woodson in free agency, a guy who didn't want to grow Green Bay. I don't think he ever really wanted to be in Green Bay, but he made the most of it and helped make you a champion. But then you don't stay active in free agency. It's just really weird. So with the new general manager, with Ted Thompson being removed from that post, you would think comes a new approach. Because ultimately, with Ted Thompson, I think a lot of the frustration for Packers fans, and again, understandably so, is you've got somebody like Aaron Rodgers. He has one Super Bowl trophy, that is great, but you feel like there should be more Super Bowl appearances, more Super Bowl trophies. And whether it's stubbornly digging in your heels with Dom Capers all these damn years when you shouldn't have, or failing to be aggressive enough to surround Aaron Rodgers with enough health, both on the offensive and defensive side of the ball, to be more legitimate contenders and potentially hoist more Lombardi trophies, that would be incredibly frustrating. As a Bears fan, I would know nothing about having that level of quarterback, but still, I can picture how frustrating that is. And how many more years of Aaron Rodgers can you sit there and waste? Your window of opportunity to win is now, and you must try to do everything you can to win now. So it's not surprising then that the Green Bay Packers have been a little bit more active in free agency. First, you look at the signing of Muhammad Wilkerson. This is really one of these low-risk, medium to high reward type of deals. 1 year, $5 million. It really is a short-term worthwhile gamble on a guy who's only 28 years of age, who brings positional and scheme versatility, who also played under new Green Bay Packers defensive coordinator Mike Pettin back with the Jets when Pettin was the defensive coordinator there under Rex Ryan in 2011 and 2012. So Wilkerson knows the coach. He knows the system. He understands the system, understands the fit of the system, as that's the system that helped him become a pretty good pro player, especially early on in his career. And I know the past couple of years, Muhammad Wilkerson hasn't been that great, especially after the Pro Bowl season of 2015. But it's not like the situation in the Jets organization was all that great the past couple of years. It's not like the team was all that great. And yeah, maybe he wasn't that great, but it wasn't like the team around him was very good either. And this could be one of those situations where a change of scenery situation may do him some good. It may do him a lot of good. And bringing him in to work under a defensive coach that he knows, he's familiar with, that he has worked with before, and only having to throw out $5 million, it seems like a really good deal. So you check that off as a good move for the Green Bay Packers. And if it doesn't work out, it was only 1 year, it wasn't for a ton of money, and at least the logic was there. You add strength to some of what you have on the defensive line already with guys like Mike Daniels and Kenny Clark, especially if you want to do more hybrid 4-3 type of alignments. Wilkerson could play in a variety of different positions. It makes a world of sense. They had to do it. And it was a good deal, I feel like, for Muhammad Wilkerson and the Green Bay Packers. Wilkerson gets a chance to have a 1-year prove-it deal while he's still in his late 20s, still in the peak of his career. So that way, if he goes out and has a really good year, he can hit free agency before he's 30 and potentially con a team into one more massive payday for him. And the Green Bay Packers get him for 1 year to see what they got, and they didn't have to invest a ton in him, knowing that the upside is pretty decent. It's a good deal. Now, the Jimmy Graham one, I have a little bit more trouble trying to reconcile. Graham's going to be 32 this year. He saw a significant decline in his yards per catch in 2018. A significant decline. Now, I know he went for double-digit touchdowns for the first time in a couple of seasons, but he went from averaging 13, 14 yards a catch or so to averaging like 9 yards a catch. There was a difference. And it's really confusing to me that, you let Jared Cook leave in free agency. You bring in Martellus Bennett. It didn't work out. Now you're again trying to go the free agent route at the tight end position with Jimmy Graham. And then offering a contract of 3 years, $30 million. And while I'm not sure how much of the total deal is guaranteed, it's worth up to $22 million over the first 2 years. Which sounds like to me probably a 2-year, $22 million deal for Jimmy Graham. And that price tag seems quite steep. Quite steep. This feels like they're paying more for name and reputation than current and future NFL reality of production for Jimmy Graham. And it seems odd to me to cut Jordy Nelson, a guy who had been very productive for the Packers for almost a decade, who, yes, I understand, wasn't great in 2007. How much was that on him losing a step and not being the same player? How much was that on losing Aaron Rodgers to injury and Brett Hundley coming in and Hundley not being the same type of quarterback, same level of quarterback, also having a better rapport with Devontae Adams? A lot of different factors that come in. I'm not that surprised on the surface that the Packers would cut Jordy Nelson. But what surprises me is you would cut Jordy Nelson and then give very similar cap money to a similarly aged, similarly declining tight end. Like you swap that cap money for the most part from one position to a different position. And while you could say wide receiver is a bigger position of strength for the Packers and you trust more in them as an organization to be able to evaluate that position, totally understandable here. It is odd, like I said, to just take that from one position and tie it into another. I don't quite get that one as much. And when you look at the big picture, the grand scheme of things, if this was what you were going to end up paying Jimmy Graham, at this stage of their careers, there is not that much difference at this stage of their careers between Jimmy Graham and Jared Cook. And let me emphasize again, at this stage of their careers, especially statistically. Now, you're going to point out the discrepancy in touchdown catches between Graham and Jared Cook in 2017. Fair argument. But Jared Cook also had similar reception numbers and was better in terms of his yards per reception. Point I'm getting at is not that significant of a difference. And when you look at how much the Raiders paid Jared Cook in terms of total money, and the fact between 2017 and 2018 and what the Packers gave Jimmy Graham, who's an older player, who is closer to a full decline than Jared Cook is, it is a little bit head-scratching. And that's what I'm saying. To me, I look at it and feel like maybe they should have just kept Jared Cook with the way things played out, because they're giving Graham a lot more money for potentially less production, and all the while, in part to help facilitate that, they cut a guy that still, I feel like, has the ability to be a solid receiver in the NFL. So you take one position, weaken it. At the same point, you strengthen this other position a little bit, but not by that much, and not nearly for the amount that you think to be able to justify that price tag. So this is one of these things for Packers fans. Aggressiveness in free agency sounds great. But if you don't execute right, and you don't bring in the right pieces, does it really matter? Muhammad Wilkerson, great move. Jimmy Graham, sorry. That's a little bit more puzzling to me.